China's factory activity bouncing back from COVID-19 lockdowns the month before.
The official Manufacturing Purchasing Managers Index fell to 49 in July from 50.2 in June. Anything below the 50-point mark indicates contraction.
Well, earlier I spoke to Marc, Chief Economist and Global Strategist at AMD ISI. I asked him what he thought the reasons were behind China's weaker manufacturing numbers.
It's a combination of factors. In part, it's obviously due to sporadic lockdowns in various areas of China. According to stats, roughly about 41% of Chinese cities were locked down at some stage during July. So, it's partly a reflection of that. In part, obviously, it's the property sector woes, which remain very much unresolved and is affecting, above all, demand for energy, for raw materials like steel. And it's the legacy issues related to the properties, insofar as there isn't actually a lot of confidence amongst consumers in terms of maintaining their jobs, and youth unemployment, as we know, is quite high at the moment in China.
The lockdowns, though, certainly a big factor behind the slowdown. How concerned are people that we're going to see more lockdowns, and is that really weighing on sentiment?
I mean, it's basically a sporadic risk, and it's not going to go away because the underlying policy remains in place. And getting this under control, you only have to actually compare numbers elsewhere to realize that COVID is still very much rampant in a lot of places. It's just not putting nearly as many people in hospital, or let alone creating the sort of fatalities. Other countries have different ways of dealing with it. So, it does remain a very much an intermittent threat. And it's not good in terms of business planning. I mean, that's the biggest problem for Chinese businesses, local Chinese businesses.
And you mentioned the property sector, which accounts for about a third of the Chinese economy. Sales down 33.4% in July. Why is the sector facing such a squeeze?
It's a debt burden. Basically, a lot of the developers have got a lot of debt and sales have plummeted. I mean, the worst case is obviously Evergrande. Their sales, as reported, are now 98% down on the same period of last year. Other property developers are probably not quite as acute, but you're still talking something in the region of 30 to 40% because of their financing problems. Which result, to a large extent, in, there was basically a move to say property developers need to get their balance sheets in order.
And just to follow up on Evergrande, they were ordered to pay $1.1 billion over unpaid debt. It's a saga that just seems to keep going and going, doesn't it?
Yes, it is. I mean, they've tried various forms of asset sales. Now they're being forced into it. They were supposed to come up with a restructuring package. The deadline, according to the deadline that they set last Friday, they didn't manage it. Now they're being, basically people are demanding, well, I want my debts repaid. And this is what I mean. There needs to be a much more coordinated effort at balance sheet resolution for the sector and for the banks who are involved. Now, that involves a lot of people. But at the end of the day, it's either get into an ever deeper morass, as Europe showed during the 2010-2019 decade. If you don't deal with these issues forcibly, basically they sit around like a very bad smell on a lot of companies' balance sheets and hamper the economy, because whatever's tied up in terms of loan loss provisions cannot be used for lending elsewhere, and that hampers the economic growth.
Many people